This week we look at number 5 in our series on managing for the Master till he comes. This one's entitled Dealing with Debt, and a very important subject for us today in a world that seems to be completely burdened by debt. Our society seems to revolve around about those who are in debt and those who are making money off those who are in debt. And that's actually in complete contrast to the way that God intended things. He recognized that sometimes people had to get into debt, but there was this plan. There was the Jubilee year when everything was kind of reset, and when it came to debts, they were supposed to be cancelled after 7 years. Go back and read what it says there in Deuteronomy 15. Wouldn't our world be a better place if that happened? Well, I'm sure there will be some way of working around that, and people would still be oppressing others, because as it says there in Proverbs 22 verse 7, the rich rule the poor, and borrowers are slaves to their lenders. Borrowers are slaves to their lenders. And there we have the critical point with debt. It's not only the implications of repaying the debt and so on, but it's also the fact that stops you from doing other things. You've got to work to pay the debt. You've got to work and not think about what else you could be doing. You're not really free to decide. That's why in the notes for this time, I put in quite a bit about freedom of choice, because getting into debt, well, some people may say I didn't have any choice, and that may be so, but in so many cases, our indebtedness is due to the fact that we can so easily slide into debt because that's our choice. We want things. We are also told that we are not to love the world. Don't long for the things of the world. If you love the world, you won't have the Father's love in you. 1 John 2:15. Because you're going down the wrong route. You're thinking of going this way because that is a convenient, pleasant way in which you get the things that you think you want. And you put it on the plastic. You don't really worry about when you're going to have to pay it back. And of course, there's always that day of reckoning when you do have to do that. And you have to try and find some way of repaying and getting out of debt, because now you don't have the choice. You're having to pay back the debt to your lender, and you can't do things. You can't do things for your family. You can't do things which are really important. You can't do things for the church. You can't invest in things for the future. You see what I'm saying? That's why indebtedness is such a terrible thing, I would say. In fact, I'm almost paranoid about getting into debt. I would never get into these hire purchase agreements, as we used to call them in England, or as the popular phrase was, buying something on the never, never, because you never got out of debt. And that was one thing that I was absolutely, as I say, almost paranoid about. Let's ever do that. I didn't want to do it for a car. If I didn't have enough money to buy the car without going into debt, I didn't want to buy it. And that's why we always had old and cheap cars, because we never could really afford anything better than that. And I didn't really care. I mean, who cares how you arrive? You got from A to B. That's all that matters. I've never had anybody ask me, what car did you drive to get here? That's, to me, irrelevant. So all this love of wonderful cars and the fact that the automobile industry wants to push you to buy bigger and more expensive cars, that's always been the way. Of course, now with the gas issue, it's smaller cars and they're more expensive, or going to something that's a hybrid or even an electric car, but they're incredibly expensive too, and you have to go into debt to buy those. So just don't do that. The only thing that I ever really had to do was going into debt with a mortgage, and I still didn't like that, and we paid that off as soon as we possibly could. So as we think of things like this, let's look at those words from someone like Ben Franklin. Rather go to bed supperless than rise in debt. Andrew Jackson When you get in debt, you become a slave. Same thing as what it says in Proverbs 27. So think of your own personal finances. If you are in debt, try and find some way to get out of it as soon as you can, and don't get into more debt. That's my best counsel for you today, and I really believe those are messages that come to us from God.